Hello everyone. Today I'll be talking about some best practices for identifying, reporting, and fixing issues when migrating an application from Silverlight to OpenSilver. The first thing I will do is demo the application I will be using, which is a Silverlight app that we're migrating to OpenSilver. Then I will talk about the need to check whether the issue you found has already been discussed or fixed. We're talking about how to reproduce the issue in a separate project, both Silverlight and OpenSilver, about further isolating and reducing the code to create a minimal reproducible example that shows the specific OpenSilver issue. Then reporting the issue on GitHub, investigating the possible cause for the issue. Then try making changes to the runtime, testing, checking for regressions, creating or improving the test cases, and then committing, making the pull request, and then some QA. I'll try to go very fast through all those points. First of all, the application that we'll be migrating. So let me show it to you real quick. So I have here an enterprise app that is made in Silverlight. You can see the different folders, and I'm going to run it with Visual Studio 2015 in Internet Explorer. So I can see that the first thing is the login screen with the title here, and then I can type things and click login. The same app migrating to OpenSilver. So the steps to migrate are in the documentation of OpenSilver under the migrating Silverlight app. It looks like this. So the same project. Then we have the two entry points, one to run in the browser, one to run in the simulator. So the same files are there. So let me start the project in the browser here. So I'm going to rebuild the project and then run in the browser. So right now I'm using the version 1.0.0 from NuGet.org. And let's see if it renders like Silverlight. So I have the migrated version on the right and the original one on the left. Migrated version run on Chrome. I can see already that there are some differences here. Let me make a screenshot of the differences. We can see multiple issues here. One, of course, is the borders here should not be there. The background also should not be there. Also, if we see the login text here should not have the line below it, and maybe some other minor things. So here I have deliberately used a version that is not the latest one. So some of those issues have been fixed in the meanwhile, but for today's demo, we're using an older version so that we can investigate how to fix those things. The first thing you should do is test with the latest version of OpenSilver to see if those things have been fixed. As I said, I am not going to do that, but just as a general practice, what you would do then is update your repo to latest develop branch. The usual recommendation is that you have a fork of the OpenSilver repository and you keep your fork in sync with the upstream repository. So you update your fork to the latest develop branch, and then you rebuild the package and so on. Let's pretend we have done that, and now I'm going to rebuild the package. So this will be useful to run the project again against the latest versions if something has been fixed, but it'll also be useful to rebuild the package, or at least the runtime, so that the PDB files, so the symbol files, will be in sync so that I can debug the OpenSilver runtime. For that, I'm going to use the steps described in the OpenSilver repository, github.com/OpenSilver, then go to OpenSilver. Make sure you follow all those steps here, how to build code from the repository. Update Visual Studio, clone, and so on. I'm not going to do all the steps. I have already done that actually beforehand. So I'm just going to do the step where we build, but make sure to follow also the other steps because they are needed too. So I'm going to do the step where we build the package. I need the developer command prompt, not just the command prompt. And I'm going to run the build NuGet package opensilver.bat. So here I need to choose the version. Latest version right now is 1.0.0. For my local test, I'm going to use 1.999 and 0.0. All right, so now it's building the package. And while it's building the package, let me tell you about other things that you should be doing. So you should check whether the issue has already been discussed or fixed. For the developers in the user team, you should check in the features in projects resource, in the internal Stack Overflow, as well as in the Microsoft Teams discussions, in the general chat, and also in the other channels. For everyone, also people outside the userware team, you should check the OpenSilver documentation, especially the troubleshooting page and the third-party section to see if the issue is related to a third party. And also check the issues on GitHub, both the open and closed issues. Especially, I would like to show real quick on the OpenSilver website documentation, the troubleshooting section here. So for example, the fact that some errors are displayed during design time, but it should be ignored because they are not important, and other known issues, and also the third-party section here if you encounter an issue with a third party. All right, so the package has now been built. So let's check whether the issue has been fixed in the latest package. Now I can update the package from the package manager. So make sure you have the source folder here set to the location where the packages are built. So it should be under the output folder, the OpenSilver in the repository. And then you will see your new version appear. So I'm just going to check it and click update. It's going to be updated. And then I need to rebuild the solution. In some cases, you may need to kill msbuild.exe from the task manager. So this is important. If you have issues, make sure to kill msbuild.exe when you update your package, or close Visual Studio and reopen it. But in that case, you need to close all the instances. Let's run again and see if something has changed. So again, in this example, I'm using not actually the latest, so I'm not really expecting the issue to be fixed. At this point, we're going to move to the next step, which is reproducing the issue in a separate project. Why is this important? You could say, let's keep working with the main application that we're migrating. But isolating in a separate project will help us to pinpoint the root cause of the issue. It also allows for a faster trial and error because the compilation will be faster if the project is very small. Also, we will modify the project a lot, like you will see in the next phase. So we don't want to break the original app for that. We would rather modify the separate app. Then also when we have reproduced the issue, we can share easily the project with the rest of the team or upload it in the GitHub issues for the people to reproduce the issue. And also we'll have a test case ready to be added to the unit tests or the test application, as we'll see in a moment. The general step is I'm going to inspect the visual tree with the simulator to find out approximately where the issue is located in the app. And from there, the goal will be to replicate it into two projects. One will be a Silverlight project, the other the OpenSilver project, to show side by side that OpenSilver is not working properly. The general idea here is to pinpoint the root cause in OpenSilver. So we need to highlight a specific Silverlight API which is not working properly in OpenSilver. We need to highlight it with the minimum lines of code, and we need to have both Silverlight and OpenSilver versions to show that they do not work the same. When we do that, we need, of course, to use the latest develop branch. So if you have a fork, make sure to keep it in sync. And also, if possible, try and do everything in one file, or at least something that is as short as possible. So let's do this real quick. I'm going to use the simulator, which, as you know, is a very useful tool for inspecting the visual tree and debugging. So let's run this. In this big application, I need to find out where the issue is located. I'm going to click Inspect Visual Tree and use this tool here to check what's going on. I'm just going to click inside, and then I will walk up the visual tree. So let's see what we have here. We have a border. So what I'm going to focus on today is the white border that appears around everything here. So there are multiple issues, as we said. In the original app, there's no white border. So let's focus on this today. So let's see where this right border is. So we can see that there is a border content presenter, so it's apparently outside of this. There is the grid, it's still outside of this. Group box, this looks like the right one. If I go above again, I get to the grid. So here we do some divide and conquer to identify where in the visual tree the issue might be located. It's probably not in this outside grid. It's probably not in this inside grid. So it must be between the two. And because there is only one child here, we know that the issue has to do with the group box control, which is a non-standard control. So it most likely defined inside the application code. So there are multiple ways to find these things here in the regional app. I could check the path of the XAML file here and go to that file and see how the login is constructed and so on. Or I could just go and search for the group box in the application code and copy it from there into a separate app to just work and focus on the group box. So I'm going to search for a group box here. There we go. Then I click the button to show where this thing is located. So here it is. I'm going to extract this into a separate OpenSilver and Silverlight project. Let's do this real quick. In OpenSilver application, I don't care much about the application name. Let's choose a version of .NET. This is just for the entry point. I don't care much, actually. Let's do 5, for example. The change between .NET 5 and .NET 6 would be more related to MS Core Lib stuff, the core CLR. But for UI things, it doesn't change much. So I have this empty project here. Let me first see whether the hello world works. In the meantime, I'm going to create a Silverlight project as well. So Visual Studio 2015 for that. And then where is it? Silverlight application 1. Let's create a .web folder, just keeping the default here. Let's see if the Silverlight application runs as well. So the OpenSilver application is running with Hello World. Let's check just Silverlight as well before we put the group box. Silverlight application by default is white, and when it crashes, it's also white. So I really want to put something else in the main page. So let me put the same as the OpenSilver one, which is the Hello World. There we go. Let's run the Silverlight app. Okay, Hello World is there. So if you're not able to run the Silverlight app or not able to debug it, make sure to follow the steps. In the OpenSilver documentation under migrating Silverlight app, there's a section related to environment setup with links on the Silverlight SDK and other tools you need to run the Silverlight app. Now I need to extract the group box from the big enterprise application that I'm migrating. So I want also to put, if possible, everything in the same page. Let's do it first in the Silverlight app. Let me put it in the main page. The group box controls, some usings, and most likely need some styles, because here you can see there's an apply template. So where is this template defined? I don't know. Let's search for one of those names which are supposed to be inside the template. So app.xaml has the template group box. So here it is. Let me copy this one into the separate project. Let me put into the app.xaml so that it will be visible from just every page. Let's see if there are any resources needed here that I need to copy as well. So this is fine. Here I can see value static resource box overlay. So this will not be found unless I copy it. Let me search it in the original app. Group box overlay is here, so let me include this as well. Is there any other reference from something that is external to this code? I don't see it, so this looks fine. Let's make sure that the prefixes is fine. So local is OpenSilver application 1, and the group box is defined in OpenSilver application 1, so the namespace should be fine. And now let's add the test group box. So for text group box, I guess I'm gonna use the stuff in the login. I saw in the simulator that it's defined in login.xaml. Here we go. Take this thing here. The prefix is correct because local is defined in OpenSilver application 1. All right, so let's start with this and see what happens when I start this project. Let's run with the simulator. It will give us better exceptions in case I forgot something. So we do have the login. The background is white, but that's fine. Let's do the same code in the Silverlight app. Main page, we're gonna put this. The prefix will likely be different. I'm gonna fix the prefix in a moment. And the group box, I have it here, and I need styles, which I'm gonna put into app.xaml resources. Looks like it's fine. So let's fix the prefixes now. So group box in our case is defined in Silverlight application 1. So let's use the XML ns local equals Silverlight application 1. Let's do the same for main page, and we should be good. Let's try and run. We can see the original app versus the migrated one. Let me run it again. This was about reproducing in a separate project. So next step is further isolating and reducing the size of the code to create a minimal reproducible example that shows the specific OpenSilver issue. This is critical, right? We know that the issue is due to the fact that OpenSilver is not perfect yet, and some APIs in Silverlight are not properly or entirely implemented in OpenSilver yet. So we need to pinpoint which Silverlight API is not working properly in OpenSilver, and that's not something we have done yet. To do that, multiple approaches. So you could start also with a project from scratch and try and find some defects with just a few lines of code, or you could start with what we have already done and do some kind of divide and conquer approach, where basically you will be removing code, and as you remove code and you still find there are issues between the two versions, you keep removing code. At some point you remove too much that there are no more differences between Silverlight and OpenSilver, so you need to add back some code and maybe remove other code until you find out which is the line, if possible, or multiple lines, that highlight a defect in OpenSilver. So you should not stop until you are 100% sure that reducing the code further will hide any defect. All right, so let's do this real quick. So we have the two versions when we're gonna destroy this thing until we arrive to the smallest possible code. So first of all, is the issue related to something that is inside the group box? that could be a possibility, right? Let me close the enterprise app because that's the original app and I want to break it. And same for the original Silverlight app. Let me close it. Now we'll be working on the two small apps that reproduce the issue. I was saying maybe it's the content of the group box that is causing an issue. Let me remove it. I assume that because this is center aligned, it would be nice to have some fixed width done so that we can see something. So let's put some fixed width. Let's do the same with the Silverlight app here. Let's remove what's inside and let's try and run OpenSilver app. I still have the issue, so I guess I need to remove more. So what can I remove here? The header alignment. Yeah, probably the issue is related to the style of the group box. So let's go to the style, which I've put here. So let's destroy this thing. Let's start with some setters, like what if I remove those things here? Let me run again, and let me do the same for the Silverlight app, which of course is behaving fine. So I said today I will be focusing on the outside border that appeared, and I noticed that when I remove those setters here, I can no longer reproduce the issue. I can still reproduce the issue of the background, but I'm going to focus on the border here. So I should add them back, and that's how the divide and conquer approach is going to look like. So these things we keep. Since it's related to border, let's try just removing those other things. Maybe the background. Let's see in the template. Perhaps we can remove some stuff. Let's just remove everything. I guess I will need the content presenter, but I'm not even sure. So let's just remove everything from the control template and see whether this thing still has the issue. All right, let's do the same in Silverlight. I have removed this. I have removed the whole content. Let's run. Let's hope it doesn't break also, because sometimes with the code behind, there could be references to those things here. Okay, so nothing shows up. It's not broken either, but because Silverlight, when it's broken, it's white. Let me use a different background for the application.
If you want to check it's broken, you can just put a breakpoint in the unhandled exception handler, so you know when it goes in.
So let's check if the Silverlight application is broken by putting a breakpoint in the application handled exception. So it doesn't go here, and the breakpoint is red, so it's functioning. So the application is not broken. So in Silverlight, it's supposed not to render anything, and in our app, it renders a rectangle. Let's see if we can remove further. Maybe we can remove the background, and maybe we can remove the template altogether. Let's try. Let me run this. All right, I still have a square, and Silverlight most likely nothing. So looks like just two properties. So let's just put those two properties directly onto the group box, and I can probably even remove the style altogether. So let's put this thing here, border brush, border thickness with 1. Let me remove the style altogether. Let's see if we can get this to be a one-line reproducible example. Okay, I still have the issue. Group box, let me check the group box code. Can I remove stuff here? Let's just remove everything. I think you got the point. So now it's just a few lines. We have a group box with some border, and we have the code of the group box, which is just the content control. Maybe I can further improve this by just using the content control here directly, because group box inherits from content control. Anyway, I could investigate further, but let's stop the investigation here. So I have my minimal reproducible example. And of course, I should have the exact same code in the Silverlight app and highlight that they work differently. Next step, we want to report the issue on GitHub. So first thing, we should check if the issue has not already been reported. Make sure to check both the open issues and closed issue on GitHub. Make sure you check the best practices that are on contributing.md page on the GitHub repository. And then create an issue on GitHub with the following information: how to reproduce. So you should provide code or a screenshot of the code, or ideally the sample projects that we have just created. You can just zip them and upload them. You should explain what's the actual result when you run. Basically, actual result is I get a gray square. What's the expected result? I should not get a gray square. What's the environment? So in our case, you should say I'm using the latest commit from OpenSilver develop branch that we got on February 8th. 2022, for example, and then just specify everything that can possibly have multiple values, like which version Visual Studio. We know that OpenSilver works with both 2019 and 2022, so you can specify, for example, using Visual Studio 2022. We know also that you can create a project with .NET 6 or .NET 5, so you can say I'm using .NET 6, for example. That's the pop-up that appears when you create the new OpenSilver project. So you should specify the environment. And of course, please provide some screenshots of the expected and actual results or a video if it's suited for that. A couple of things. One is you should use one issue per issue. In our example, maybe you have highlighted multiple issues in OpenSilver. You should create one ticket for each issue. Another thing is the title is important. So when you submit the issue on GitHub, please make sure to spend some time to have a great title. So the title should say, for example, there's a bug, so bug. And then ideally, the title would be a summary of how to reproduce the actual result and the expected result. How can you make a one-line summary of those three things? In our case, for example, we could say that setting border thickness and border brush on a content control causes a border to be rendered. So setting a border thickness border brush on blah, 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 this is how to reproduce, causes a border to be rendered, that's the actual result, instead of no border. That's the expected result. So in one line, you have described the thing.
So when exactly do you actually do reporting? Because you see a problem, you see an issue and start working on it, for example. So do you actually report that, or?
If you see an issue on OpenSilver, like we did together now, yes, we need to report it on GitHub. The idea is...
even if you can't start working on it?
Yes, absolutely. Please, before trying and fixing an issue in OpenSilver, after you have done all that we've done together, which is to pinpoint exactly which API of Silverlight doesn't render, and we could have gone further, right? Because we could pinpoint more precisely what in OpenSilver is broken from an external point of view. But still, we got to a reproducible example that is just 3 or 4 lines big, so that's not too bad. Then yes, please create a ticket for it so that we can track it so that people in the future can find it. And also, when you will make a pull request, you can reference the ticket in your pull request, and the pull request will be referenced from the ticket. We can have a discussion about this. Maybe you think of a solution, you're not sure about it, so you can try it out. You can make some changes, so we're going to do that in a moment. Check if there are regressions, create some test cases, then create a pull request which contains both the fix and the test cases. And then with the pull request, you can have a discussion on the GitHub ticket saying, look, this is an idea, I have to fix it, as a reply to original ticket, right? So the original ticket is just what is on screen here: how to reproduce, actual result, expected result, environment, screenshots, video. Then you investigate, then you can reply to your own ticket saying, look, I think I have a solution. You can reference to your pull request so that other people can look at your pull request, see whether it breaks their apps or whether something needs to be changed. You can have a discussion with our CTO or other people in the team. And then your pull request will be merged and the ticket will be closed. All right, so moving forward, let's discuss how to investigate the possible cause of the issue. Multiple steps here. First, make sure you can debug the OpenSilver runtime. If you're unable to have the breakpoints work in the OpenSilver runtime, it's not worth it to continue. Then make sure you have a workflow that allows you to make changes rapidly to the OpenSilver runtime and test them rapidly. So if every time you need to build a package, for example, that's not going to be productive or effective. Basically, you could reference the runtime directly from the solution where you have reproduced the issue. So as of now, February 2022, this requires some manual changes to the CS proj. This will be improved. And also we plan to have an article on the how-to section of the OpenSilver documentation related to how to reference the OpenSilver runtime directly from any OpenSilver solution. Another approach is to use the Xcode post-build command so that every time that you build the OpenSilver runtime, not the whole package, just the OpenSilver runtime project, it will copy the OpenSilver runtime DLL to the right location, basically the packages folder in your disk, so that it will automatically be applied to your test project. Then you can do step-by-step debugging, of course. In our particular case, we're going to do an example that is to use the inspector tools in the browser this time, not the simulator like we did before, to inspect the CSS, because borders, we can imagine that borders are related to some CSS properties. And from there, find what is the name of the CSS property and look for it in the OpenSilver runtime code. Let's do this real quick. So first of all, making sure you can debug the OpenSilver runtime. I have already done the step of rebuilding the OpenSilver package, following the instructions on the GitHub repository to do that in the README. This means that the PDB files, so the symbol files, are supposed to be in sync so that debugging is supposed to work. Let's check if it works. I'm going to put a breakpoint somewhere in the OpenSilver runtime. So as you know, the entry point of your application is app.xaml.cs, which inherits from application, and application class will be executed before the app class because it inherits from it. And so that's the very first line of code. It's actually in application.cs. Let's first of all open the OpenSilver solution in src opensilver.sln. Let's find the application.cs class. Let's put a breakpoint there and see if it works. By the way, there are two application.cs files because many classes are declared as partial, and the reason is that the things that are not implemented yet are under the work in progress folder. So the methods and members that are implemented there, and the things that are supposed to be implemented are not in the work in progress folder. So that's the one we want to look at for. And so this will be the first line of code, right? So if I put a breakpoint here and I run the other Visual Studio, the breakpoint will not be hit because this instance of Visual Studio is not attached. Each instance of Visual Studio has a list of breakpoints, and you need to be attached with the instance of Visual Studio that has the breakpoint you're interested in. Two approaches here. Actually, more than two. I mentioned that you could reference the OpenSilver runtime from the OpenSilver application. So you could reference the OpenSilver runtime from here. That's one approach. We're not going to do that. So in this example, what we're going to do is we're just going to open the application.cs file in the other instance, the one where I'll be launching the OpenSilver app, and put a breakpoint in that instance. Another approach could be to run without debugging this instance of Visual Studio and then use the attached to process in this other instance of Visual Studio for the breakpoints to work. Either approaches are fine. Now, because this is the first line being executed, if you start without debugging this one, then it will be too late to enter into this breakpoint with the other one, unless you put some kind of timer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the path of this file, right click here, copy full path, then go to this instance, click open file, and then just open the file from there. So here I have my application. You can see the breakpoint doesn't appear here. As I said, each instance has its breakpoint. So let me put it here. And now let's run the app. So I'm going to run in the simulator so that the breakpoints work great. As you know, the simulator runs your app in the context of .NET Framework or .NET Core. Right now, it shows this symbol, which means that there is an issue with the symbols, which most likely are not in sync with the DLL being loaded. So that's where the modules window is going to be useful. So go to Debug, Windows, Modules. From the modules window, you're going to see all the assemblies that are loaded in the processes to which Visual Studio is attached. Visual Studio can be attached to one or more processes, and this will show all the assemblies that correspond to those. So here we have the path of the OpenSilver runtime. This is the OpenSilver runtime, and we can see that the symbols could not be found. So I can right-click and click Load Symbols to see if it's able to find them. And so let's try and put the symbols that are supposed to be in the package. So let's see if they're in the package that I've built. So I'm gonna go to the users package folder, open the private package I created, go to lib, net standard, OpenCDL. So that's supposed to be the PDB. So let's see. Basically, we need to make sure that this DLL here corresponds to this PDB here. Let's first try and just load this one and see what happens. Okay, it's not good. So most likely this is not the same as this one. So let's go and check why. So let's copy the path here. Copy file location. So here it is. We can see that it's this file and this one. They don't have the same date. They don't have the same size. So it's definitely not the right one. All right, so let's do it the clean way now. Let me specifically rebuild the OpenSilver runtime, which I'm going to do anyway when I need to make changes, right? So let me rebuild the OpenSilver runtime and copy the OpenSilver runtime again. So for now, I'm going to copy it manually. Ideally, then you would use a post build command to copy it automatically. So I'm going to take this bin here and I'm going to take all those and copy those into the package folder. Place. Then I need to go back to the OpenSilver application, rebuild. So let me check what package this thing is using. Oh, this thing is using 1.0.0, so it would certainly not work. Yeah, when I updated the project to the 1.999, I updated it into the original migrated application, the enterprise app. I didn't upgrade it to the external reproduced example. So that's my mistake. I need to update it now. Let's make sure you are pointing to the path where you built your packages, which is under this path. Then click update. The version 1999 is here. Let's try again. I have my breakpoint in application.cs. I rebuild. I launch the simulator project. Let's see if breakpoint is hit now. Okay, breakpoint is hit. Just for information, if we go back to the modules window, so debug Windows modules, we can see that OpenSilver DLL has the symbols that are loaded and it shows where it took those PDBs from. And then you can again compare the date and size of this PDB with the ones you just built to fix this kind of breakpoint issues. All right, so now we're able to debug. That's the first step. Second step is make sure you can experiment with the fast development cycle. So for that, we're going to use a post-build action so that every time I make a change to the runtime, it gets copied to the right place. For this, I'm going to go to the build events of the OpenSilver runtime and use some code. So I do have standard Xcode. So this will take the OpenSilver runtime and copy it. And so here I should choose the location in the packages folder. Let's try and do this. Let's rebuild the runtime, see if it did replace OpenSilver properly. Yes, it did replace it properly. So let's see what the development lifecycle looks like now. Let's say, for example, I want to add some debug writeline. So if it's in the browser, it's going to be a console.writeline. If it's in the simulator, it's going to be a debug.writeline. This may be improved in the future, but right now that's how it is. Okay, let's rebuild the runtime. Now let's rebuild the test app. Okay, let's run the simulator. So everything that can improve your productivity by having this kind of post-build actions, for example, or other things, make sure to spend time to set them up. So here in the output, you can see it works too. And if we try in the browser as well, debug, start new instance, here we go. Let's go to the developer tools F12 console. We get the console log as well. So that was the next step. Then let's try and fix this particular issue. So we could do a step-by-step debugging. In this particular case, I'm going to use another approach, which is inspecting the DOM tree using the inspector here to find out where this border may come from. Let's try and do this. I cannot select it because apparently there is some div in front of everything. So I will need to dive a little bit to find out where this thing is. Again, some divide and conquer until I find the control, which is the one in blue. I can see there's some border color here, border style. Looks like that's the culprit. So I'm gonna look for these properties in the OpenSilver runtime. Let's do a search in files. With the CSS properties, they appear like this in the inspector, but when you set them in JavaScript, you usually set them like this. The only places where CSS border style may be set are those three. So do we have a rectangle in our code? I don't think so. Do we have a border? I don't think so. What is this one? So we have this one here, which is inside the property. So I guess here we will need to do a file or references to work it up. So apparently we have this. This is called in the border thickness inside the border control. So again, we don't have a border control. So I'm just gonna skip this. And we also have it here, which is inside the control.cs. So do we have control.cs involved? Let's check. So in our project, we have the group box, group bots inherits from content control. Let me click F12 here. Content control inherits from control. So yes, it could possibly come from here. So by excluding the things that are not related, it appears that this is the line that causes the issue. What is this? Basically, we have this method. Let's see where this thing is used. So this thing is used only here. So we have the border thickness dependency property. This is a standard XAML engine dependency property. We have a property metadata, which allows to set the default value, which is just going to be empty thickness. But we have this specific OpenSilver method, which is not present in Silverlight, and which allows to specify which method should be called to update the DOM. This method is going to be called to update the DOM when the property changes. All right, so let's just comment this thing out and see if the border is no longer there. Just gonna build and then rebuild the output. Let's run. All right, the border is not there. So now I should add some other things, right, to make sure that the group box is still there. I mean, I can inspect. That's the least I could do, but most likely I will want to add back some things to make sure that still the rest works. All right, so we think we found a solution, but of course this is premature because this may break a lot of other things, right? So what's next? So the current step is done, right? We have investigated the runtime. We found the line that is at least related to the issue. Now we need to investigate this a little bit, so maybe understand the code, how it works, and so on. We also need to check for regressions, right? So next step, check for regressions. So you want to check for regressions where? First of all, in the original app that you are migrating. Once you think it's good, you may want to test again the showcase and compare it to the one that is online on OpenSilver.net and see whether everything renders properly. And then you may want to run the unit tests if the change is non-graphical. And if the change is concerning the UI, you may want to run the test application to check for regression. Test application.sln is part of the OpenSilver repository, and it's an application that exists in both Silverlight and OpenSilver, so you can compare the two. So let's at least test the app that we are migrating. So let me go back to the original enterprise app. Let's check if it's using the latest package that I have locally. Yes, it is. So I just need to rebuild, and let's run. All right, so you can see that the first issue that I've been working on, which is the white border, is no longer there. Let me open again the screenshots from before. On the left is original Silverlight, on the right it's what we had. And now you can see that it's already better. The white border is not there. And we can also see that the rest of the app has not changed. So at least there are no visible regressions on this particular screen in this particular app. Of course, you would need to check much more for regression. We have discussed this. Next step. Next step is create or improve the test cases. Now that we have a minimal reproducible example, we may want to add it in the unit test or the test application if it's UI related. And we need to create more tests to cover dubs that we may have. So in our case, what dubs may we have? We have commented out the border thickness. So this maybe will break the border thickness when it's applied to other controls. Apparently, in Silverlight, we have highlighted the fact that when you apply a border thickness to a control, it's not supposed to render. So most likely, Silverlight will render the border using control templates and then a border with a template binding to the border thickness property and so on. But if you have just a control with a border thickness and border brush, nothing should appear in Silverlight, and in OpenSilver it did. So it kind of makes sense to comment this out in control, but then you may say, okay, but what if I have another kind of control? So then I would list the other kinds of built-in Silverlight controls that may have a border. I need to list those. Some research would be needed. It's the border control, of course, maybe some other controls, the text box and other controls. And then I need to write examples for all of those. So I'm not going to do that now because it takes some time, but just the general approach is go to the OpenSilver repository, go to SRC, go to tests, test application for everything related to UI. And then you can open the Silverlight and the OpenSilver version of the test application. Let's do this real quick. Then you need to add a section to this app because, as you imagine, it's pretty large. Let's run the test application, both original and the migrated one. Let's run this one too. All right, so this is the Silverlight version of the test application. There are a lot of things, all possible ways to stretch an image and other things. The OpenSilver version has errors. I guess this is not using the correct version. And by the way, we need, of course, to update it to use the same version as the one we're working on. So let's do this, version 1999. Let's close all windows. Let's rebuild. Let's run the app. So I could run in the simulator or the browser. It's supposed to get the same results. Let's run in the simulator because if we have errors, they will be more explicit and debugging will also work better. All right, there we go. And so we can see, for example, that for image, we also have all possible ways to stretch an image and all other tests. All right, but here it's where you're supposed to add a test. You're supposed to add a new section or a test to an existing section. So you would look for something related to borders. If you don't find anything related to borders, you can just add the section named borders. Then you have the registry where you add the list of, this is basically the menu on the left. And then you add the test section where it's just XAML with the test. So for example, the image list is here with the images with all the possible stretch values is here. So you do something like this. You can add the test for just a simple control. So that's the minimal reproducible test that we did. You put it here. You add also a test for all other possible controls you can think of that use the border property, border, text box, and so on. And ideally, you find that they all work fine with this change. So if one is broken, you need to investigate further how to get the control to work without breaking the other ones, of course. So when you think you are done, next step. So that's the moment you will make the commit. So with the commit, you need just one thing that is very important. You need to include information on how to reproduce the issue that you have fixed and what's the actual expected result. So it's basically the same as the title of the ticket you created on GitHub, right? What we did for this issue is setting border thickness and border brush on a simple control will cause a border to be rendered instead of no border. That was what we said for the GitHub issue title. So now for the commit, you can use the same kind of conventions that we have. So look at the other titles. And so that would be a fix and then prevent a border from being rendered when setting border thickness and border brush on a simple control, for example. Why you need to make sure that you explain how to reproduce what you have fixed, because sometimes what you did breaks something. In that case, we need to revert what you did. And so we need to reproduce what you were actually trying to fix in the first place after we revert your commit to fix it in another way. All right, that's all for commits. The last steps is to make pull request. So you may see that the title has changed, but not the content, because when you make a pull request, we also need this information. So the pull request should not be, and neither the commit, they should not be remove the border thickness method to update DOM, right? This is not interesting because we can get this information by looking at the commit details with the files that have been modified. And so we are almost done. You can reply to your own GitHub issue saying, look, I think I found a solution. Here is the pull request. And by the way, in the pull request, make sure to include also the test application changes you did. Ideally, in the same commit, we would have both the fix and the test unit test or test application changes. It's fine if it's in multiple commits. Ideally, it would be at least in the same pull request. Then you can reply to your issue saying, I think I found a solution. Here's the pull request. You have a link to it. The pull request would then have a link to the issue. There will be a discussion there. For example, you could say, I'm not sure if it breaks something. I think I covered all the cases with test application. Can you please check whether all the cases are covered? Do you think of other things? For the userware team, we may want to have other people test it if it's a very critical thing, like this one, which could possibly have some regressions. We may want to run more test cases. We may want to check whether other applications that we have migrated in the past are broken or not. That's just because it gives us more test coverage. So these are the kind of things that could also be discussed. And then your pull request will be reviewed, it will be merged, and that's all. So that's all. We discussed the best practices for identifying, reporting, and fixing issues when migrating an application from Silverlight to OpenSilver. Thank you very much to all of you. If you have questions, feel free to leave comments, and talk to you very soon. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.